Greetings, APUSH scholars, for our review for Unit 17, and this is on Presidents Ford, Carter, Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Bill Clinton. And the only thing you need to know, I'm looking at a review sheet here from top to bottom for our upcoming test, and the only thing you need to know about Ford here, he's kind of a placeholder between Nixon and Carter, is the Helsinki Accords. In 1975, the U.S. and most of the countries of Europe signed an agreement. It's not actually a treaty, but an agreement to respect post-World War II boundaries, not to use aggression as an instrument of foreign policy, and to respect human rights. And this is a lot of criticism here of Ford for this agreement, although the goal here is something akin to the détente, trying to diffuse tensions with the communist countries of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. And this comes to bite the president during the debates with Jimmy Carter. He's going to make a statement that there is no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe. And what he meant was no domination of the spirit, but it made him seem naive and supremely ill-informed. What's important is the Helsinki Accords do become a tool that dissidents will use during the period of glasnost under Gorbachev to pry greater freedom in the Soviet Union as things begin to unravel. Why is Carter elected in 1976? Well, in contrast to Nixon, Carter is an outsider to Washington. He promises that he will never lie. And Americans are essentially penalizing the Republican Party for Watergate, and they trust Carter's moral persona here. He's openly evangelical. He says he's born again. He's a Sunday school teacher, and he's that the breath of honesty that we're looking for after the skullduggery of the Nixon years. Why does Carter then lose the re-election in 1980? And the flip side is that is why does Reagan win in 1980? The AP in the past has asked questions on the rise of conservatism in the 1980s. Well, some problems for Jimmy Carter. I'll sort of give you four categories. One, the issue of government, the idea that government has gotten too big, too bureaucratic, too bossy, and that taxes are too high, that welfare is rewarding the lazy at the expense of those who get up every morning and work hard and pay their taxes. So government too big, too many taxes. Two, social issues, that the government has become too liberal. A lot of these cases under the Warren court here just collectively giving too many rights to the accused, to criminals, and legalizing abortion, the kicking public prayer out of public schools, affirmative action. This collection of social liberalism is going to get people going into the Republican Party in the 1980 election. Third category here, economic ills. Under Carter, you have soaring inflation, soaring interest rates, high unemployment, and high oil costs, high gas prices. And remember, the combination high inflation, high unemployment is called stagflation. And fourthly, foreign affairs. Jimmy Carter is going out of office here. The American hostages have been held by the Iranian Islamists for 444 days. We've been humiliated. His sort of commando mission in Iran has failed. Our aircraft have crashed on the desert in southern Iran, and 8 Americans are dead there. Afghanistan's been invaded by the Russians right after he signs the SALT II treaty, which makes him seem exceedingly naive. And he's given Panama, the Panama Canal, back to Panama. These things are going to work against him. And Reagan, in contrast, is this man of very sunny disposition. He is a professional actor, of course, and he seems to be, he's going to say our best days are ahead of us. And Reagan is going to promise two basic things. He's going to cut taxes, and he's going to rebuild the military. Nobody's going to mess with us under Ronald Reagan. Some Supreme Court cases you should know. There'll be references to them on the test, and these are by no means all of the quote-unquote liberal cases here, but Engel versus Vitale, this is going to end prayer in public schools. Roe v. Wade is the case that legalizes abortion rights. And Bakke versus the Regents of the University of California, 1978. Alan Bakke is an engineer. He's in his 30s, and he's going to be denied admission to the University of California into med school, and he's able to prove that he has higher test scores than minority students. And the end of this case the Supreme Court is going to rule for him. They're going to rule that he's going to be admitted into medical school, but the Supreme Court is going to uphold affirmative action, that the government does have an interest in diversity in state universities, but it's going to strike down what are the quotas, the specific numerical quotas. So affirmative action is okay, specific quotas are not. So this leaves affirmative action basically alive and kicking, but a little bit in a gray area. The Iranian Revolution of 1974, remember in 1953, the CIA helped overthrow the Iranian president, Mr. Mossadegh. And this guy has been nationalizing American and British oil wells, something a communist would do. He's not a communist, but we put our guy in power back in the 50s, the Shah. And the Shah is a strident anti-communist. He's pro-West. He's buying American military weapons. He's one of our best customers. And but he's also brutally oppressive. He's suppressing dissent. And Carter has got this human rights policy. He backs off support from the Shah. Street protests break out. This very charismatic Islamist leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, is going to lead an overthrow of the Shah's government. And in ensuing days, Iranian students, quote unquote, are going to breach the walls of the American embassy and take 52 Americans hostage, and proceed to parade them and humiliate them for the next 444 days, leading to this botched commando raid. They will be released on the day of Carter's turning the office over to Reagan on Reagan's inauguration day. So this is a huge thing. The Iranians are going to be sponsors of state terrorism and revolution outside of Iran in years to come. Economic problems of the 1970s, again, keep in mind here, interest rates are high, inflation is high, unemployment is high, and gas prices are high. Carter's Malaise speech. This speech is called the Malaise speech, and the context here is he's making a pitch for an independent energy, a policy for energy independence. And he's going to, in about 8 minutes into this speech, he's going to start criticizing Americans for their selfishness, for their materialism, for their cynicism, and it's going to turn a lot of Americans off. He's going to seem like a Sunday school teacher or a preacher on a bad day. And Reagan wants no part of this. Reagan, when he is running for office in 1980, is going to be saying our best days are ahead of us. And in 1984, he's going to say it's morning in America. And Carter, this is one more reason why people want Carter out. Carter's foreign policy successes, the most notable one, is the Camp David Accords, where the Egyptians and the Israelis sign a peace treaty between the Israeli Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat of Egypt, the turning over of the Panama Canal to the Panamanians. Now, you could look at this as a failure. You could argue that, but as far as him wanting this and getting it through 2/3 vote in the Senate, it is a success as far as his goals. But it does come back, arguably, to bite him in his reelection of 1980, or his failed reelection of 1980. Also, foreign policy success arguable, bringing human rights into the argument of how we treat other countries. You might say this is a good thing. You might say it's a bad thing, as far as us abandoning friends and abandoning a bad choice to a worse choice. For example, Somoza, dictator long supported by Americans in Nicaragua, is replaced by a worse Sandinista regime, a Marxist regime that is going to take over farms and businesses, is going to suppress dissent, just like Somoza is going to persecute the Catholic Church. So you've got the foreign policy failures, most notably here in Nicaragua, failure in Iran, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the giving away the Panama Canal, and the inability to deal with the Arabs to lighten up on the high gas prices. These are all failures, or perceived failures, of the Carter administration. PATCO, we're getting into some things here on Reagan. PATCO in 1981 is going to crush a U.S. government and a government employees union called PATCO. It's the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Union. They want a raise and they want shorter hours. And Reagan warns them, and he fires them. He fires the whole lot of them. I'm guessing about 90% or so. There's some supervisors basically keep the planes landing, and U.S. Military air traffic controllers are brought in. And this is basically a warning shot to unions that they have no advocate anymore in the White House. One reason why unions tend to be pro-democratic. and anti-Republican in their funding and in their political support. The ERA is the Equal Rights Amendment, and the plan here is to put in the Constitution a protection that there will be no sex discrimination. And this passes Congress hugely under Richard Nixon in 1972, but it's got to go to the states for ratification. And it needs 38 states by 1979, and it's got 35 states. So it's just a hair short. And there's an extension given for 3 years, and it's going to basically crash and burn in 1982. Phyllis Schlafly is an anti-feminist woman's leader of a group called Eagle Forum. And she is going to actually, because of her efforts, their 5 states are going to rescind their ratification. And this is very questionable constitutionally. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. Of course, it's moot when you have the 3 states short of the 38 needed. But her argument is basically, remember, this is coming, 1972 is a year before the peace agreement with the North Vietnamese that ends the war. And she's going to argue that women are going to be eligible for the draft, that they're going to be conscripted into the military. If there's an Equal Rights Amendment, she's going to argue that this is going to put abortion rights in concrete in the government paying of abortions. And it's going to be cemented forever in the Constitution. She says that this is going to free men from having to pay alimony, and that women who are in dependent positions are going to be, made worse without alimony. And she's going to argue that, we're going to have unisex bathrooms, that men and women are going to use each other. And I don't know if this is silly or maybe prescient, given things that are going on today, but she is going to be part of the conservative opposition to the ERA, which does not get passed. Sandra Day O'Connor is the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court. This is done by Ronald Reagan. She's a conservative woman, a female judge from Arizona. SDI, hopefully this isn't too random for you, those of you watching here. SDI is the Strategic Defense Initiative, and this is Reagan's plan to, and this is kind of simplistic here, to put missile zapping satellites in outer space to knock down ICBMs that might be shot at us from, say, the Russians. And the idea here is a defensive shield. And this is in violation of I think it's 19, I won't give you a date here. I want to say it's 1972 under Nixon, 1972 ABM, Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, where we signed a deal with the Soviets that we would only have 2 sort of batteries of 100 missiles protecting us from an offensive assault here. And the plan here is by limiting the ABMs, the anti-ballistic missiles, it will lock us into what's called mutually assured destruction. We're guaranteed if a war breaks out that we're going to blow each other to kingdom come. And the idea here is to guard against the temptation to launch a first strike if you had, scads of these ABM missiles here. So here's Reagan basically going back on this agreement here not to be shooting other people's missiles, other countries' missiles, out of the sky. So this never is, it's never achieved, and it's very expensive. And some people say this is part of that arms race that's eventually going to bankrupt the Soviets and going to lead to the collapse of communism in 1991. And this SDI is nicknamed Star Wars because it's coming out at the time of Lucas's Star Wars movie. Reaganomics. Reaganomics is this idea that tax cuts will stimulate the economy. And when Reagan is accused of giving larger tax cuts to the wealthy, the argument here is that producers and investors will build more factories and businesses, and this will create jobs. That there will be, this is also called trickle-down economics. The idea that wealth will come from the top down by supporting capitalism, by supporting the free market. Also involved in this idea here is that lower taxes will actually increase tax collection, that with the acceleration of business activity by having lower taxes, you'll actually garner greater taxes overall. Operation Desert Shield. We're moving on to George Herbert Walker Bush, not to be confused with Little Bush. Operation Desert Shield follows the 1990 Iraq invasion of Kuwait. And Desert Shield is the placing of American soldiers in Saudi Arabia to protect Saudi Arabia from Iraqi invasion. This very quickly becomes the better known Operation Desert Storm. And this is the spring 1991 invasion U.S. invasion of Iraq and Kuwait, kicking the Iraqis out. It's a very quick campaign. It's very successful. It's a multinational force with Americans, many Europeans involved, many Arab nations joining us. It has full UN support. And the one thing at the end here, Hussein is left in power, and some questions, sort of linger here. One is Bush did not want to leave the desert and go into the Iraqi cities where there would be more American casualties, which happens later on with the invasion of Iraq under the younger Bush. The UN mandate was not to topple Hussein, but to kick him out to liberate Kuwait. Also, there's this concern about angering our Arab allies. The notion here is we want to kick Hussein out of Kuwait, but we don't want to set a precedent that Westerners are going to go in and remove Arab leaders from power. The ADA is the American Disability Act. This is passed under President Bush. 1989 and 91 in Europe. Communism is going to collapse. You have your first free elections in 1989 in a communist country, and that's Poland, with Solidarity putting Lech Walesa in power here. You have, in the fall of 1989, the Berlin Wall falls, hugely symbolic here. And this is all happening because Gorbachev is ending the Brezhnev doctrine. Remember Brezhnev after the Prague Spring in '68 in Czechoslovakia? Czechoslovakia is invaded, and Brezhnev has this policy that socialism will be protected from capitalism, imperialist takeover. But Gorbachev ends this, and he ends it for the Soviet Union itself, not just the outer empire, but the inner empire. The Soviet Union will cease to exist on December 26, 1991. And what's happening here is all 15 republics, including Russia, will secede. Why does this all happen? Well, the Brezhnev doctrine is essentially revoked. You have glasnost, which allows free speech, and this is going to lead to political debate. It's going to eventually lead to elections in Russia. You have perestroika, which is the restructuring of the economy, allowing basically the free market to reemerge. You have strikes. You have the disaster in Afghanistan. You have just a massive outcry for an end to decades here of tyranny. And the Soviet Union, the communist system here will collapse, will implode. It will dissolve without violence, without a literal revolution. And it's really quite an amazing thing to happen here. And this is happening under Bush's watch. Again, glasnost and perestroika, it's on the review sheet here separately, but glasnost is this policy of free expression, free speech, free assembly, free press, and perestroika is economic restructuring. So maybe something akin, kind of a synthesis thought here, something similar to the NEP, the New Economic Policy under Lenin after World War I, allowing sort of the revival of the economy here by allowing small businesses to have some freedom. Moving on to Clinton. Clinton is what's called a new Democrat. And these are Democrats that are sort of law and order Democrats. They're Democrats who are not anti-business. They're not liberal as far as the tag goes that Republicans put on them in the past. And he's considered a moderate. And some examples of Clinton's moderation. He passes NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement. And this is basically getting rid of tariff barriers between Mexico and Canada and creating a huge free trade zone. This is something that Republicans are more, and he has supported the Republicans, but this is more of a Republican thing, free trade. And don't ask, don't tell. This is going to allow gays to stay in the military as long as they, keep their orientation secret. So they won't be hunted down, they won't be kicked out if they're found out, as long as they're not telling. This is considered to be something, he's keeping, one name for this is called triangulation, where he's trying to split the difference. He's kind of liberal, but he's kind of conservative still. The Defense of Marriage Act, this passes under Clinton, and this is that the federal government will not recognize homosexual marriage, something you would expect from Republicans, from somebody like Phyllis Schlafly, somebody like Eagle Forum, which was actually against gay rights. The end of the lifetime entitlement for welfare. There's welfare restrictions passed by the Clinton administration, and then you have the The Brady Bill of 1993, which is kind of liberal, at least some people would say, requiring background checks and a 5-day waiting period to buy a handgun. But this is followed by, it's kind of a mouthful, it's the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which is going to ban some assault weapons, but it's going to fund tens and tens of thousands, something around 100,000 police are going to be funded, and it's going to it's going to crack down on crime. And this is an example of conservatism of this new Democrat. By the way, Clinton is going to be for the death penalty, and as governor of Arkansas, he's going to basically take pride in executing some people on death row, and this is showing his bona fides. Remember, Michael Dukakis lost to George H.W. Bush for his opposition to the death penalty. Remember in that debate that he has with Bush in 1988, the moderator is going to ask him, if Kitty Dukakis had been raped and murdered, would you still be against the death penalty? And he's going to, like a machine, like a robot, is going to say that he's still against the death penalty. So here, Clinton is making sure there's no confusion here. NAFTA, the goal of NAFTA is to increase free trade between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And the opposition to NAFTA, very similar to our current President Trump's opposition, is the fear that there would be the loss of American jobs. And there is the loss of some American jobs to Mexico. Mexico has a much cheaper minimum wage, doesn't have all the union protections and environmental protections. And just as an aside here, I've done a lot of traveling in Mexico, crossed the border many times. And they're called the maquiladores. They're these factories, and there's a lot of them. When you cross at El Paso or from Laredo into Nuevo Laredo, they're the zone of, there's a lot of industry that's come out of the United States to Mexico to take advantage of cheap labor. End of editorial or observation, at least here. Clinton's impeachment. Last thing here, Clinton is impeached in 1998 by the House of Representatives. They levied 2 charges against him, perjury and obstruction of justice, and he is acquitted in the Senate vote in 1999. There is not the 2/3 to kick him out. And the deal here with Monica Lewinsky, see if I can say this, I'm simplifying this greatly. There's a woman named Paula Jones. She was a receptionist at an economic conference at a hotel in Arkansas who claims sexual harassment by then Governor Clinton. And while he's president, she's to beat the statute of limitations, she's suing him in a civil suit for sexual harassment. And there's an investigation going on by a guy named Ken Starr, who is investigating a real estate investment scandal called Whitewater. And he's going to get involved here in this sexual harassment lawsuit. He's going to he's going to side with Paula Jones, and he's going to get testimony from Monica Lewinsky. No relationship to Paula Jones, but Paula Jones is looking for a pattern of sexual harassment. And it turns out here, the short of it is that Monica Lewinsky was involved in a sexual affair with the president in the Oval Office. And the president lied about this affair. And Monica Lewinsky, Paula Jones, her case is actually thrown out. It's thrown out because she couldn't show any harm. She couldn't show any damage here. And she does settle out of court with President Clinton for $850,000. So Monica Lewinsky is basically shamed, and she's gone on to speak out against bullies and cyberbullying, which is kind of interesting. But there you have it. That's what we have on the things you need to know in the test. There's a lot more stuff that we've gone over in this unit, but this is what you need to know for the test that's coming up. So study hard, study early, study often, study smart, and as they say south of the border, buena suerte.